Hello, I'm Ernie Humphrey, the CEO of FP&A Webinars. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us for our webinar today, FP&A Done Right, Impacting Performance Across the Enterprise. I would like to thank our webinar partner, Centage, whose strong commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible today. Despite an increased focus on FP&A, most companies fall short in conquering the last mile of FP&A. The last mile of FP&A is empowering company leaders with business intelligence to prescribe actions that improve company results. Recent survey results show that companies face inherent barriers in terms of data immaturity, technological immaturity, and analytical immaturity in optimizing the strategic value of FP&A. Company leaders across the enterprise need access to data relative to key drivers of departmental performance to direct actions that allow companies to respond effectively to dynamic market conditions. This means exploiting unexpected opportunities and taking steps to mitigate losses. Today, you will discover how companies are leveraging the right technology to deliver business intelligence to the right people at the right time in the right format. Before I delve into the content, I'm going to offer a few quick words about FP&A webinars, cover a few housekeeping items, and then I'm going to review our learning objectives as they offer the pillars of our value proposition to you in investing an hour of your valuable time with us today. About FP&A webinars. FP&A webinars offers webinars designed to empower FP&A success at companies of all sizes across all industries. We only do what we do best, which is webinars. I encourage you to visit us at fpnawebinar.com. Now for the exciting housekeeping items. The slides are currently available for download under the handouts area in your GoToWebinar control panel. We'd like to hear from you today so we can take your questions at any time in the questions area of your GoToWebinar control panel. Finally, we appreciate your consideration in taking a short survey at the end of the webinar today, as we always appreciate the opportunity to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. Now, our learning objectives for today's webinar. After the webinar, we'd like you to be able to assess the level of FP&A analytics and business partnering maturity at your company and understand what it takes to reach a leading state in each area. We'd like you to be able to empower more informed decision-making at your companies. We'd like you to be able to understand key drivers of FP&A success in today's world and to be able to identify specific opportunities to increase the strategic value of the FP&A function at your company. How are we going to accomplish our objectives today? Well, we're going to take a look at FP&A analytics maturity. Then we're going to have an overview of driver-based planning, talk about that at the macro level. Then we're going to talk about FP&A business partnering, which is necessary to really have successful driver-based planning at the departmental level. Then we'll take a look at some survey results, look at some FP&A trends and challenges in today's marketplace, and then we'll take a more positive spin on FP&A success in today's world and look at drivers of FP&A success from leading companies, and then we'll wrap things up with some closing thoughts and a few Q&A items if we have time. In order to optimize the strategic value of the FP&A function, you need to have the right people, right processes, and right technology in place. The FP&A Analytics Maturity Framework, developed by the International FP&A Board, offers companies a tool to assess where they are at in terms of being able to deliver best-in-class FP&A in today's world and what it takes to get them to the next step of their journey to best-in-class FP&A. So let's take a quick look at this framework here by the International FP&A Board. This is a slide I would print out. I always suggest slides I would print out to my webinar attendees, but I think it does a really good job. A lot of times after webinars, I get questions about where do I start. So you have to know where you're at before you know where you're going. So it's really nice to have a tool that lets you see, okay, where am I at? Where do I want to go, and what's it going to take to get me there? And there's a lot of information here, a lot of text here. That's why I suggest that you print this out. But I think it all comes down to people, process, and technology. So I like to start here with process. So you'll see in the basic state, we have no formal process here. And then as we go to a more mature state, the intermediate state in which we would call define. We have a defined process. And then as we get to a leading state, we have that integrated planning process. And then if we have, look in terms of collaboration, again, we look at basic, we have no collaboration. And then as we move to the right, we have increasing levels of collaboration. And this is the cat's meow, real-time collaborative planning. And then we have our technology. Notice that I went to technology last. So they have to all be aligned, people, process, and technology. And at many companies, this requires a cultural shift to make that investment in FP&A. So we need to have our ducks in order here and have that collaborative framework in mind, have that executive support if we're going to go on this journey. So in terms of technology and analytical tools, here we have no planning, modeling, BI tools, basic tools, and then we have integrated driver-based planning model connected with a BI solution. So again, this is something that I would encourage that you take a look at, maybe sit down with your team, take a look at where you're at. Again, I like to take a look at this because if I want to go, let's say I'm going from 2 to 3, oh, we only have minimal collaboration. If we have more collaboration and if we get some descriptive diagnostics, it'll really help us out and help deliver that value. And the other thing that I want to point out on the technology front, as we start to go from defined to leading, we go away from that reliance on IT, which is extremely important in really facilitating that what I call the business agility and that scenario analysis and being able to react in real time. So again, I think this is a tremendously valuable tool as far as that macro level, just to see where we are, where we want to go, and how we're going to get there. So now let's drop down a little bit to driver-based planning, which is a key, as we saw in the states leading state and the states to the more mature side of the framework. And I want to take some time here to keep it simple because there's a lot of talk about driver-based planning. I think sometimes people make it too complicated and they get lost in the weeds. We have data overload, so we have driver overload too. So you want to identify factors that drive company value. Sometimes I think companies take this too far and they try and look and manage and KPI up to 10, 20 drivers, and I think that's just too much. From what I've seen, it can be as little as three drivers. I've seen 3, 5, 7, 8. So I think depending on your company size and your complexity, I think that's 3 to 7. Probably 3 to 7 is probably the right range. And then you have to establish relationships between key performance indicators and those value drivers. And then this is the art, as much as the science, incentivize actions that impact performance. Again, talk about the webinar title, Impact the Performance Across the Enterprise. Impact performance measured by KPIs, and those KPIs, as they go up, that will impact the company value. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, let's just take a step back a little bit and talk a little bit about making sure that we're measuring drivers that matter. It's easy as this. In order to achieve X, Y, Z need to happen, or if A, B, and C happen, our progress will be derailed. So we need our strategic objectives here. If X, Y, Z happen, then we're going to make it, we're not going to make it. So what are those things that are really going to move the needle in a meaningful way? And some questions that I get about drivers, are they industry specific? No clear answer, possibly. Are they company specific? Possibly. Is company size specific? Possibly. Are they company risk tolerance specific? Possibly. So what I've seen from my experience is I would say that there are a few drivers that are industry specific, and then there might be one other driver that's really maybe not even dependent on the industry you're in, but there will be at least 1, 2, or even 3 that are company specific, especially in terms of your company's competitive advantage. So what is that driver that's really fueling that competitive advantage? And then what is that other driver that really impacts your innovation, which is really what helps drive your company value. So those are just some things to consider. So now let's take a look at kind of an example of some company drivers and then how to relate those KPIs. I like using some survey results from this survey, the digital imperative, measure and manage what's next, because I think it's really what we're really starting to see is when you ask CEOs and CFOs the key drivers of company value in terms of finance, we're always a little bit surprised because those drivers are shifting to customer related and employee related metrics instead of finance metrics. So we're looking at now the art of managing non-financial assets as opposed to financial assets. So it's about the art of managing our people and managing relationships with our customers and managing the relationships with our suppliers. So we see top 5 customer satisfaction, quality of business process. There we go for our finance folks. Customer relationship, quality of people. Of course, you're all thinking what I'm thinking. So that means employee satisfaction, the employee experience. And then, of course, in the digital age, the reputation of our brand. So this is just some interesting results. So again, so this would be the first part of that process. What are the drivers? And then we look at what are the KPIs to those drivers. And then some of these we're going to see are a little bit different. And what we'll see if we look at this slide is that we're going to have to work with HR and operations in order to help them understand the language of finance, really put some quantitative analysis behind the numbers. So we're going to see employee productivity, employee engagement and retention, customer experience and satisfaction. We might have to work on some customer surveys. What does that mean? How do we measure that? So customer relationship. So you'll see all these are KPIs, customer pipeline and retention. And this I see is a real key to what we're seeing in driver value and what I see in the CFO surveys that really are going to impact financial performance. These two right here are still what I see. Customer pipeline and retention. So on the sales side, how do we make sure that that pipeline is healthy? We have that good customer relationship. We have that visibility. Obviously, quality of our people, talent sourcing and pipeline. What's our forecast? How are we doing in terms of headcount? But these two here are really more, I think it makes sense in terms of what we think, but now in terms of actually managing to these factors and putting some quantitative analysis there and formalizing those drivers, I think that's where we're going to see a little bit more focus. And again, it's always been important, but I think companies are starting to put more value in human capital once again, productivity, employee engagement, and retention. And of course, in today's world, it's very important that we look at that data quality. We need to have the right quality data. We have to get it to the right people at the right time, which we'll talk about a little bit later in our presentation. So I like this framework and these relationships and what they look like. That's going to be the subject of another webinar. That's a whole other webinar. But just some dynamic planning, driver-based planning, success factors. Some of these seem like common sense, but again, sometimes I review them anyway. So I like people to keep these things top of mind as they're thinking about their projects. You need that executive support. You need the strategic focus on agility. So as you're making that business case, a piece of that should be if we do this, it's going to allow us to make better decisions. It's going to allow us to look forwards instead of backwards. It's going to be able to allow us to react. So agility means the ability to react. I like to be able to react in real time. And in some sense, I want to mitigate my what I call reaction is I already know it's coming, right? I have a good idea that it's coming, so I'm already ready for it. You want short planning cycles. Here is probably the most important piece on here. You need to have the buy-in, but the right technology for collaborative planning and scenario modeling. So we have to be able to communicate in real time across the enterprise, one version of the truth, and we have to be able to do scenario modeling. This is a big inherent barrier to many companies. So you have to have the technology that allows you to do that scenario modeling. So that is tremendously important. So this is where a lot of companies will get themselves stuck in one of those less mature states that I mentioned earlier. And then I also mentioned earlier that in terms of this FP&A mindset, we have to have support, which means we have to have this commitment to continuous improvement and the alignment of people, process, and system. A commitment to continuous improvement, sometimes this is really driven by visibility. We'll talk about this a little later. If you have that enterprise visibility, it really opens up your eyes in terms of opportunities to get better. So it really, some people really latch on to this. So it helps you see these areas where you can improve. So you see improvements, you take the low-hanging fruit, and then you keep going and going. Then you look at bottlenecks, and you look at, especially in the area of processes, this is where we can see that culture really kind of is organic in its growth. And so, we talked about driver-based planning on the macro level, but what about if you want to do that at the departmental level? So maybe I'm in FP&A. How do I want to help impact the performance of, let's say, accounts receivable? How are we going to do that? We have to have the right relationships in place. And so what we have to do is we have to look at aligning the FP&A function not only with business operations, but also with finance. So we need to acquire business knowledge, and we need to have the right relationships in place to influence decision making. And we'll talk about how to do that. So a good way to influence decision making is to get company leaders the information that they need in the right format at the right time. So that's how I will define that influence of decision making, is delivering that business intelligence to my departmental leaders, but also to my finance executives, because they are going to be the two groups of consumers of what I'll just use a general term in reporting. So those will be the consumers of reporting in each of the key areas, and then we'll look at how to do effective reporting. So, and then in terms of just the FP&A profession in general, the value of a good FP&A professional is shifted away from focusing on what happened, what should happen, and then how to execute change. And how to execute change, it's really important that we have those relationships across the enterprise, because we need a team to execute change, especially if we're looking at a transformational change in how FP&A is done in our organization. And this maybe goes without saying, the job is both strategic and operational in focus. We mentioned we might need a little bit of a different skill set and more analytical. And I think it really requires an investment in relationships, which is something that needs to be taught. So your FP&A team, this is a skill that needs to be taught. Building relationships. You may have people on your team that are better than others. Building relationships is something that's a skill that can be taught. Some people have it inherently. This can be taught. And then investment in the challenges, understanding those, and then how to partner across the enterprise to unlock strategic opportunities. Again, it's all about building those relationships. So it's important that we train and we invest in effective business partnering. So the skills related to effective business partnering in our FP&A teams and actually within and beyond finance, in my opinion, is important. So the characteristics of a good business partner, again, this might seem common sense, but this is something that you might print out. And if you're the treasurer, the CFO, or the FP&A vice president, you might want to look at these and just go by team and take a look and think about these things. What are the dynamics of my team? Do I have this on my team? How do I get everyone up to the same level? Do I invest in training? Do I have little groups to make people that are strong in one area train the other folks, or do I need some new talent? So good communication, obviously. Commercial curiosity and business acumen are extremely important. You need to be able to interpret the data and see the big picture and the details. You have to be creative, and I think the last one, I think, is it says it best: personality types that thrive on new ideas and creative thinking rather than just number crunching. And I would just have one caveat: you still have to have that number crunching ability, and you may need one person on your team that is the number cruncher at heart, even though they have that creative thinking. But these are just some things to keep in mind, characteristics of that good business partner. And then let's take a look at the FP&A business partnership maturity model, also a model that was developed by the International FP&A boards, an A board which is run by Larissa Melnichuk, a good friend of mine, who is also the CEO of FP&A Trends. So this is also can be a tremendously valuable tool. So it gives us a sense of, okay, where are we at in terms of business partnering? Where do we need to be? How are we going to get there? But then I think it gives us these 4 pillars. The business knowledge, again, we go from basic, developing, leading. Business knowledge, they have limited, good, or strong. And I would just point out, as you're looking to build relationships across the enterprise to increase your business knowledge. One area of the company that has that holistic business knowledge kind of by nature is treasury. So I had the opportunity to work in treasury when I was in finance before I became a CFO, and I got to touch all areas of the business. So if I was gonna go to someone and get that high level knowledge of business operation, sales, marketing, AR, AP, treasury is a good place to start. And then the second pillar would be that degree of influence. And then this is obviously something that takes time. And unfortunately, that degree of influence can be limited by your job title, but there are certain people that are able to manage up. So that's definitely a skill. You got to be careful, but it's an art. You can manage up. But at the end of the day, in a leading state, especially if you're the FP&A leader, you have to be a trusted advisor. You want to be involved in the decision making, and you want to be that sounding board. So you want to be that internal resource. So APAR is thinking about a new project. Sales guys are thinking about new ways to assess financial health of their customers. You want those folks coming to you, and this is a great way to get to that leading state, and then you can help them, and being a resource for them, you can impact their performance. Of course, you got to have those soft skills. You have to be confident in challenging the business. I would say confident in the right way. Delivery is everything and challenging anything. So that's a skill you need to teach. You have to have the ability to persuade. And one thing that we need to do in finance especially is be able to be a storyteller, the story behind the numbers, even the company story, even the FP&A story, the BI story. How do we all fit together? How do we contribute? How do we incentivize folks? So you have to be able to tell that story, and you have to be able to keep it simple. But again, we also need these analytical skills as well. So leading state, you want to be looking at rolling forecasts and driver-based planning, which we are talking about, and business intelligence analytics, which are tools that help educate our leaders to make better decisions. So this is just interesting. Again, it would be a good slide to print out. Again, your business knowledge, degree of influence, soft skills, and your analytics. Where are you at? Where do you want to be? The farther along you are. And of course, there's a correlation, right? So what you would see for leading companies is those companies that were in more of a leading state in terms of business partnership maturity, those would be the ones that I would say are going to be further along on the FP&A analytics maturity curve as well. Being a good business partner is really, in some sense, the foundation in my mind of being able to move your FP&A function above the FP&A analytics maturity curve, because if you had these relationships, if you're an influencer, you have the soft skills, you're a good storyteller, you're going to be able to build that consensus across the enterprise and get the people on board you need to, not only to approve what needs to be done, but actually execute what needs to be done to move your company to that higher level of value in terms of the FP&A function. So now let's take a look at, so let's just talk about business intelligence done right. So if you have the right relationships in place, impacting performance across the enterprise comes down to getting the right information at the right time to the right people. And this is how I will define business intelligence. So getting the information, so you have the relationships in place. That's the baseline. Get the right information to the right people at the right time. And so let's take a look at some of the characteristics of what I would say business intelligence done right, and then we'll talk about business intelligence delivered to certain departments and what that looks like, and then we'll tie this back to our framework of driver-based planning, which we did at more of a company level, and look at that one specific example at the departmental level in accounts receivable. At a general level, business intelligence done right delivers enterprise-wide visibility within and beyond finance so we can see what's going on almost in real time. It facilitates data-driven decision-making across enterprise, treasury, finance, sales, AP, AR, marketing. So in a sense, in FP&A, I look at this. This is that we are a delivery mechanism for business intelligence, and we deliver that intelligence to our consumers at the right time in the right format, and that intelligence means we're impacting their decisions. So if we're just giving them a bunch of information, it's not what they want, it's not going to impact the decision. That is what I would call unintelligent information. And it also facilitates more productive relationships. which internally, treasury, finance, sales, marketing, again, APAR with customers and suppliers, and obviously key supplier is going to be bank partners, so it facilitates those more productive relationships. So just my little tangent here on visibility, just a little bit more here. Visibility, I think, is strategic goal, that enterprise-wide visibility. It gives us the ability to manage relationship dynamics and understand them, internal across departments, supplier relationships, customer relationships. Again, let's bring this back to our value drivers. What did we see was important? We are obviously customer relationships. We're number one, customer satisfaction. Imagine that. There it is. Relationships with our suppliers, which should be on the value, and then internal across departments. That has a big impact on employee satisfaction and employee productivity. And then in terms of what makes the business run and allows us to execute on our strategic objectives is cash flow dynamics. I'm going to my treasury heart here. This is what we'll talk about here when we drop down on driver-based planning, cash outflows and cash inflows, AP and AR. And these are areas which, if we deliver the right information at the right time, can have a huge impact on our company value. So let's drop down a little bit to business intelligence and let's look at accounts receivable. Before we do that, let's talk about what I like to call the vicious cycle of reporting, the vicious cycle reporting cycle, which is a concept that I have come to know through my partnership with High Radius. And so I think this is very important because it gives you a framework. So a part of effective FP&A is going to be on the reporting side. So what often happens is it doesn't matter if it's accounts receivable, accounts payable, financial reporting, the monthly package. What we see is this vicious reporting cycle. So we need to understand we need to understand the consumers of our information, what they need and what they need and why they need it. So this is very important. This is what makes the information intelligent. So some of these things are probably going to make you all cringe because you're so familiar with them. So let's take a look at what we call the vicious reporting cycle in accounts receivable. Okay, we have many input sources. We have our ERP team systems. So it's probably coming from multiple systems, but it's also coming from multiple people as well. Deductions, collections, credit team. So what happens, we have someone that extracts the data normally. They're going to extract this with Excel or spreadsheet tool, constrained reporting tools, and then we're going to send the same report to our customers who have different requirements. So this is something that I never saw back in the day when I was in finance. We didn't have enough focus on this. You need to look at your consumers, right? AR, who are our consumers of information? If you don't know, have these conversations with your company leaders. What information do you need to do your job better? And you'll get a receptive audience for that. So you have your finance executives and functional managers. We'll dive down into what these folks might need. And then what happens? Same report, more questions, more insight, more reports. So this cycle just keeps on going and going. And then what are the consequences? The challenges: we don't have real-time information. It's a resource and time-intensive process. We have data overload, and then there's no drill down, so we can do some self-service analysis that we'd like to do. So there's the business agility is diminished. It's not real time, and plus it's inaccurate information. And this is what's key: resource and time-intensive process. So as you're sitting there listening to me, you're like, how in the world am I going to get all these reports or coordinate all these reports to all these people, and I'll do all these things? Well, as you start to take manual intervention into the process, once you get that framework set and going in one area, you can take the same process and really use that across multiple departments. Again, we don't want that data overload. We talked about that data overload with our drivers, and then we need to be able to get down into those details as we like. So let's look at what effective reporting or business intelligence, I would say, looks like in AR. We need to look at we need to see what do they need? Finance executives and functional managers. So these are our accounts receivable intelligence consumers. So look at that. That's what we need to do. Who's our consumer? What's our department? Accounts receivable. So for our finance executives, we can break it down. They want to monitor the overall effectiveness and cost of AR. They want to be able to spot trends and metrics that have improved or degraded over the course of time. And then we have our functional managers who are looking to, in one level, impact the productivity of their team. What do they need to do that? We help provide them the information to do that. Guess what? We're impacting productivity in accounts receivable. So they want to look at process health indicators. How are they doing? And then our customer level insights. What does that go back to? Customer relationships, customer satisfaction. It's all starting to tie together. You're probably sitting back there going, how does this all fit together? Hopefully I'm painting this picture for you on how this all fits together. And then in terms of the value that we had, so what's the value that having the right information at the right time gives to accounts receivable from the information that we may be delivering from the FP&A function? Transparency and visibility, but from that, some of this is from that technology and process, lower past due accounts, lower DSO. How are we improving customer relationships? Love to see that. Faster customer onboarding, take control of payments, proactive deduction issue resolutions. We don't want to make our customers mad. Even if they're short paying us, we got to figure out why and come to the same page on that. And then we could also identify opportunities to improve AP processing costs of our customers as we might be able to get them in using electronic documents. And then we're allowing employees to focus on more strategic activity. And my treasury heart loves this, improves working capital management in terms of our ability to manage the timing when cash is flowing, how it's flowing. So then let's drop down to AR. So let's take a quick look back at our macro level and look at all of our lines, and it's probably making you guys a little bit dizzy, but here's what we had. We had our drivers and our KPIs up here, so we had customer satisfaction, so forth. And then so let's take a look at how I might drop that down to accounts receivable. In the best world, we're looking at straight alignment with these value drivers and then our KPIs. For certain departments, there might be another step, but we'll make it simple here for the purposes of demonstration. So let's look at some APR, top AR KPIs. So we look at average issue resolution time here. That helps us with our customer satisfaction. We want to mitigate that. DSO can speak to the quality of our process and our customer relationships. Bad debt write-offs, quality of process, customer relationship, cost of AR operations, that's pretty simple. Quality of business, past due AR, right? Also should be aligned to relationships here. Days deduction outstanding, quality of our people, CEI per collector. So again, this shows us how we can, we can manage to these drivers, and these drivers are the same drivers as our company value. So we're able to provide information, insights, analysis to our AR leaders in terms of these KPIs, and then they're going to leverage that information that they're going to use and tweak these things, make them go in the right direction, and then this is going to deliver company value, right? Easier said than done, right? But the first step is to have that framework, and I think this is a little bit of a unique way to look at things, and I'm hoping that as this gets out, that I think this will be a way that companies start to look at driver-based planning. And so let's just take a quick look, and I'm not going to do the same in-depth analysis here due to our time, but if we look at the value that business intelligence can offer accounts payable, the things that matter there, we want to look at how to mitigate that invoice cost, the time to process. As the time to process an invoice goes down, we can take our discounts that are offered and we can negotiate discounts. And so that gives us improved working capital management in addition to lowering our costs. And then we want to look to straight through processing. And then this goes to workflow and operational efficiency. So talking to accounts payable, what types of information can we provide to accounts payable in terms of these metrics and what impacts these metrics in order to increase the value of accounts payable. Another key area of accounts payable is those supplier relationships, because better supplier relationships allow accounts payable to have some control over how they pay suppliers. So checks are much more costly than electronic payments. There's payment types out there, certain types of credit cards which offer rebates, and there's ghost cards and virtual cards. And so there's tremendous opportunity there. So we want to help our AP folks have the right information so we can have proactive relationships with our suppliers. The other thing that better relationships with our suppliers does, it allows us to take control of when we pay our suppliers and negotiate discounts. control of how and when we pay suppliers, tremendously valuable to the organization. And then just in terms of some of the same framework as AR, again, the transparency and visibility we can offer with data or analytics or dashboards allows us for the discounts to be captured. It can mitigate payments fraud risk if we get our folks away from checks. We can improve supplier relationships. It gives us that symmetry of information with our suppliers, which helps being proactive, more control of payments. We can leverage dynamic discounting, and then we're making folks more productive. Again, controlling how we pay improves working capital management. So again, I hope that was helpful to kind of drop things down to how we're impacting that performance across the enterprise. We are delivering that business intelligence. How are we delivering it? Well, first of all, we need to understand the consumers of our information and what information they need in terms of KPI and make sure that those KPIs impact the value drivers of our company. So now let's shift gears and take a look at some data that I have from a survey that I was fortunate enough to work on, the FP&A Empowerment, the Evolution of Technology and Trends survey, just to take a look at kind of the state of the union out there, because I've been hearing so much about FP&A for the last 2 years. I thought, every company of all sizes is out there. Everyone was going to be in that leading state, right? I was expecting to see folks on that 4 and 5 in terms of analytics and scenario analysis, and I thought it was going to be something that we were going to really see that there'd been a lot of progress change being made in the FP&A evolution, not just talking about the evolution in the FP&A function, but actually seeing it. So just a little background, we had over 300 responses across the globe. Just note, there's another full webinar on this survey. If anyone has an interest in the webinar report of that webinar, company size, we had a good range across the spectrum, job level, industries as well. And what we found was that there was, in fact, I would say a tremendous data shortage in terms of FP&A that they had to deliver that business intelligence. 88% struggled with the data availability and quality, so only 12% have access to the right data in a timely manner. So I mentioned earlier in my introduction that this was an inherent barrier, and so hopefully we'll see these folks on working on getting the data are going to get that data. So we've some that's got, data not timely, so let's get these folks into data nirvana, or right data, right time. And so just interesting that I saw that there was a data shortage. And then also along with that data shortage, unfortunately, there's also a technology, what I call immaturity. If we looked at reporting and analytical tools, we had 18% folks in Excel. I think I expected that number to be higher. And then another 43% in homegrown planning, or that homegrown BI solution. And so that's really putting a limit on the value of the information analysis we can offer. And this to me is probably the most concerning from what I saw. Ease of scenario analysis, somewhat easy or very easy, only 10%. So given the dynamics in today's world, business dynamics, it's really important that we as FP&A, finance, treasury leaders have a tool that allows us to easily do scenario analysis. So that is a key tool. We need to have that business agility. We need to be able to not only be able to tell the CEO what happens if conditions changes. What about our departmental leaders? We want to look at the AR leaders. How are their metrics going to change if the market conditions change, if there's a disruption in the supply chain? So we have to be able to do that in order to really optimize the value to our business. And then just talking about analytics maturity, 55% were basic and developing state. Again, I expected that number to be 55% on the more mature side. And only 43% are leveraging analytics to predict future results. We need to be able to look forward as well as looking back. And then here's another one that's a little concerning. Only 41% of companies report that most decisions are based on data. And so we understand that people have this great knowledge that they've built up and the instinct, but we need to be able to back that up with data. So just some interesting context of where you might be if you're in that 1, 2, or 3 state on the FP&A analytics maturity curve. You're not alone. So and then let's take a more positive look on what's driving that FP&A success from a study by the IMA, delivering business value, the role of the FP&A function, execution. First one is not really surprising. The better performing companies do a better job of translating that strategy into actionable plans. In order to translate strategy, to take this back to what I've been speaking about, this goes back to that effective business partnering. And then they do a better job identifying resources needed to deliver projects and plan results, get those resources into the budget. Part one, identifying the resources needed, right? Let's go back to our FP&A maturity. How do we get from stage 1 to stage 2? What are those resources? And how do we get those resources into the budget? What's that called? Business partnering, effective communication skills, building consensus, do a much better job of understanding how their operational plans drive financial results. Guess what that is? Understanding the drivers in the operations side. What are the drivers? How do we link those drivers to our financial results, to our company value drivers? Do a better job of variation. Now, here we go, the ability to get the story behind the numbers. So hopefully what you'll see is when you look at all these drivers of success that I'm going through, how they all go back to the content that I've previously presented in the presentation versus about what it takes to be successful in delivering value from FP&A in today's world. The best performing company models are agile, do a better job of cascading. So I talked about goals, right? Drivers going up consistently all the way up to the top level. Executive drivers that they come up with, holding people accountable. That's done through our KPIs and metrics. And here is kind of where I really like to see, and this is what really made me feel good after I developed my content and I found the survey results. So here's the best performing companies do a job of not only identifying what drives success in their business, what measures. So identifying drivers is key. It's key at the macro level, the departmental level, but then developing those measures, those KPIs. That is very important. They also establish long-term and short-term targets. So again, those KPIs and targets, improvements. They develop initiatives and projects and do a better job of monitoring results. We have to have that visibility, those KPIs and metrics, so the right technology is going to allow us to do that and those analytical tools. So again, excuse me, the drivers of FP&A success slides are really, really good to take a look at and see, where your company falls there and what you might be able to do to help energize those drivers of success. A few closing thoughts here, just 3 that I have. Really high level, but this is another slide I might print out. Just keep these things in mind. I think the first point to me might say it all. FP&A success is driven by effective business partnering, the right data, the right systems and processes that facilitate business agility. That's my definition of FP&A success. My thoughts and advice: companies should identify and manage the key drivers of value at the company level and the departmental level, and that companies would do well to assess where they stand in terms of FP&A analytics and business partnering maturity by leveraging assessment tools, 2 of which I shared with you during the webinar today. I think these tools can help companies define a path to optimizing the value delivered by FP&A. I also like to share a few additional resources. We have the hyperlinks there. So we have some of the surveys I've mentioned where I've cited some research. And so these are tremendously important resources to give more color around my context. You have the hyperlinks there. One that I'd like to point out, our webinar partner, Senage, has some great thought leadership resources on their website. So I encourage you to go there and shop around those thought leadership resources. Unfortunately, due to the amount of content that we've covered today, we're not going to have time for the Q&A session, but fear not, I will be happy to get back to each of you individually in response to your questions. I would like to take another opportunity to thank our webinar partner, Senage, and their strong commitment to thought leadership, which we share and appreciate very much. And finally, to you, the audience, thank you so much for your valuable time. Make the rest of your day great, everyone. Thank you.